All right, welcome to Mike Farrell Sports. This is what we're going to call, what do we call this? Portal
Don't know.
Pod? Portal Pod?
Sure.
That's kind of boring. This is Mark Pashanik. I've known him a billion years, and he is the czar of the portal. If you don't follow us, follow at Farrell Portal. That's the one to follow. That's the one that is the old account that you used to follow that we don't associate with anymore. And you'll see all the data coming in through Farrell Portal. And I'm Mike Farrell. Follow me at M Farrell Sports. So we're going to dive into some transfer stuff about Florida State, Tennessee, Texas, Oregon that you put out recently on the feed. But let's talk a little bit about some of the guys that have gone in recently. Demian Robinson, I was surprised that he went in because, as we talked about that linebacker class that Maryland had with, Jennings and who's the other kid?
Terrence Lewis,
who went to UCF. So Brandon Jennings goes to Kansas State, and then UCF gets the former 5-star. And now Robinson, who's a local kid that they were really talking highly of. I mean, this was a kid that was a 5-star originally on ESPN early. And we kept constantly getting, messages from Maryland fans and also others, this kid should be rated higher. I saw him at the Future 50 a while ago, prior to enrolling at Maryland. He was a tweener, he wasn't a guy that blew me away. He was a little small for an end and not as explosive as I wanted as a linebacker, but he was a 4-star kid. And we just sort of dug in a little bit as to who he's looking at. Texas, Auburn. What do you think's going on with locks? I mean, I don't think it's a bad thing if these guys don't want to be there, but it just seems like that whole linebacker class is very odd.
I mean, aside from that, they've had 22 players enter the portal at this point, which I know there's always some attrition and getting players that aren't getting the playing time to leave, but 22 is a number that you really don't want to see in a program.
And it's not a Randy Edsel type of purge. Like when Randy Edsel, before the portal was, available, and before it was a 1 year, you had to sit out 1 year. And now it's immediate. Randy Edsel came in to replace Ralph Friedgen and just purged the roster because he's a difficult human being and he's that type of guy. This isn't, Locks is a coach's coach, a player's coach, and everybody likes him. So
plus these are his players too.
Yeah, these are all his recruits. Now, okay, in his defense, Jennings had committed to at least one school prior and sort of flip-flopped through the recruiting process. And then they took a chance on the kid who went to UCF because, he had some off-field issues and, he was a guy that was originally going to go to Florida, then he was going to go to Tennessee. And, so there might be a little bit of a scatterbrain thing here. That's why Demian Robinson surprised me the most, because he's a local kid who committed and was just a very, very big, important local commitment. So we don't know where he's going to end up. He is getting interest, Penn State, Michigan, Texas, Auburn, on and on. Who else did we talk about?
Tennessee comes to mind, a little bit from Oregon. So yeah, he's definitely going to have plenty of options.
Yeah, so that was a surprising one. Bad loss for Maryland there, but again, sometimes it's a good loss. Dimas is a very interesting one, and we didn't talk about him off camera, but that's a former 5-star kid. Always, so I'm wary of these guys. His nickname is Hollywood Dimas, and he was always sort of like diva-like wide receiver. Amazing skill and just athleticism off the charts. But, he didn't play early at Texas A&M. A lot of people were surprised by that. I'm not surprised at all that he's going in the transfer portal. Now that I see, what the portal's about for 2 years now, I can sort of predict guys that might be portal candidates, and he would be at the top of the list there. I'm not really sure who he's looking at this stage, but he's too talented not to land Power 5, I would imagine. I'm sure you haven't dug into him yet.
I mean, he was recently suspended because of an arrest, which also, I know that really won't keep schools away, but it could slow things down a little bit. because from what I heard, schools kind of want to see how that situation plays itself out a little bit before rushing into something.
And the other thing about that is, Texas A&M had such an amazing recruiting class. He might have been sort of, okay, now you got off-field problems. We're going to push you out the door a little bit. There's two types of recruits in the portal, I've always said. There's one that goes to the portal and every coach tries to stop him on the way to compliance, and they try to talk him out of it. Elias Ricks was an example of that when he wanted to, transfer to Ohio State, over a year ago, and every coach, the old staff was in his way and trying to talk him out of it. And then there's the guys that you kind of, you put your arm around their shoulder and you bring them to compliance and you sort of sit them down in front of the portal and say, you know what this is? This is a portal. Might be in your best interest to go. And I think that's where the situation with Dimas is at this point in time. Baylor Cupp is another one for A&M though. This kid had a lot of promise, a lot of hype coming out of high school. Do you remember him at all?
Yeah, he's also dealt with a good amount of injuries at Texas A&M. So the potential is still there. The interest level hasn't been as great as I expected, but then again, his on-field production hasn't been really there. So you're still kind of working off of potential. He'll definitely find a home Power 5, but right now it's kind of early.
And he was in the same class, if I believe, I remember, as Jalen Wydenmaier, and he had more hype. He was the higher ranked guy. He was the guy who was supposed to immediately impact. And then he had a big injury his freshman year. Wydenmaier obviously emerged. Now he's, a mid-level draft pick and sort of regressed a little bit, but Cupp definitely has talent. It depends on that injury situation as to, where he's going to land. Akeem Mesidor from West Virginia. Okay, so we can dig into West Virginia a little bit. I'll give my theory as to what's going on there so that you don't have to take any phone calls from angry coaches and such. But there's so many West Virginia guys that are high caliber talent guys. Tell me who's been interested in him so far.
Well, he quickly picked up an offer from USC, which
pretty good one.
Yeah, Auburn is a big player in that one. Several other SEC schools. He's a talented
2 years left, it looks like.
He's already been productive on the field. He plays a position which schools thrive to find. So, he'll be able to probably just pick his home. But USC has been really aggressive from what I've seen.
That's obviously Lincoln Riley has Big 12 ties, if in case you didn't know. And he's played against this guy, so he kind of knows how good he is. But West Virginia, okay, so, I'm not going to name everybody, but there's been a lot of players over the last couple of years that have jumped out of West Virginia into the portal to different programs. Auburn, Georgia come to mind. And again, assistant coaches leaving is a factor. People think it's NIL. I don't think that's it. I don't think that's all of it. And I'm still digging into it. I think there's something there, where these kids are maybe not looking for they're looking for a better opportunity, a bigger school, maybe a bigger conference like the SEC, or maybe a bigger city like LA, if Mesidor ends up going to USC. But there's something there. And Neil Brown was pretty ticked off about it at a recent press conference, saying we're going to put out 22, talented football players who want to be here. And he, kind of took affront to the question about the roster talent. But I don't know. I don't have any true insight. I've talked to a couple of players, but there's something culturally going on there where kids are just not buying in. So I think Neil Brown with this, not a Mesidor, but just all this transfer portal stuff is a little bit on the hot seat. I don't know. Have you heard anything?
I could tell you the fan base is not happy. Like every time another name pops in, it just, they're calling their own program a dumpster fire at this point. They know something is wrong, more than just the attrition of the roster. Because looking at, they've had 21 players enter the portal, and while there's some that, graduate transfers, so on. But when you have Jackie Matthews went to Mississippi State, Darryl Porter Jr., Miami, Vendarius Cowan, which is a big linebacker to Maryland, who obviously needs linebackers now. Winston Wright went to Florida State. So, I mean, that's talent off a
Yeah.
team that really wasn't all that great this past season. So that roster, there's issues over there.
Yeah, and Tyke, of course, Brown, a couple defensive backs last year going off to bigger schools too. So yeah, we'll keep an eye on that one. But this is the thing about recruiting. This is the thing about the portal. It could put you on the hot
One
seat.
more about West Virginia. If you remember, the Josh Chandler made a statement on, I forget if it was Twitter or Instagram, saying that he was coming back in early January, and then like 2 weeks later entered the portal without any real explanation of what happened in those 3 weeks. But the fans definitely took note of that too.
Well, I'll tell you, as you dig into this stuff, and the portal's very hard to cover, as you know. I mean, you cover what goes in and what the kids put out, but when you dig into it a little deeper as to, reasons they're leaving, or, NIL, or, the culture and the coaches and all that stuff, you find some ugly stuff on players and coaches. And when you see that much talent leaving from a middling program, and I'm sorry, West Virginia fans, for calling you a middling program, but that's life in the Big 12. It's very alarming. Now, Tyler Johnson leaving from Texas, never really made a mark there, but big kid who's definitely getting interest. I think Houston and TCU, right?
I believe so, but
Yeah.
he's getting a good amount of interest. Once again, if you're an offensive lineman, especially a tackle with potential, there's a good chance you'll do well in the portal, because I mean that's a position that schools will always be looking for to upgrade.
If I'm 6'1", 260, what if I go on?
I'd pay to see that.
Do you think there'd be any interest?
I won't say which schools I think might be interested.
You've heard all my injury reports too, because I complain to you about everything that hurts me in some way, shape, or form. So I'm a little beat up too. So I'm not really sure. Legend Cavazos. So IMG kid, right? Ohio State took him. Now he reportedly had a 42-inch vertical and he ran a sub 4.4, all this stuff. I saw him many times in person. I watched his film. I did not see Ohio State talent. I just didn't. He's a Texas kid, went to IMG. Now he's in the portal. I'm thinking group of 5. I don't know really who's interested at this point in time. I haven't dug into it, but I think this is an example of a kid overshooting his ability and a school overshooting a kid's ability, and it's just not a fit.
The funny thing about him is the next day, Bryson Shaw entered the portal, who's actually been way more productive than Cavazos at Ohio State. He was initially committed to Wisconsin, I believe. So I know that the thought of him possibly switching Big Ten schools was already out there, but he started majority of the season this year, finished, I think, with 60 plus tackles. So, I mean, DBs from Ohio State in the portal generally do fairly well because they've obviously had a lot of success.
Yeah.
So I mean, Shaw should end up with much better opportunities than Cavazos.
And they weren't very good this past year defensively, which is rare for them.
Sevyn Banks is another one who's still in the portal, another DB too, but hasn't been much going on with him from last I checked.
At one point, Sevyn Banks was number 1 on some people's cornerback list for the NFL draft, just because he was the next guy at Ohio State. And that's what's ridiculous about the draft. I'm doing a draft one. I'll probably just be me talking to me because I don't know. Nobody likes me and nobody wants to be on my show, but I don't know. I'll talk about the ridiculous of that. And then, well, this is a good segue. So Jonathan Denis going from Oregon, another offensive lineman. He'll get some interest. I'm not sure if he's a Power 5 kid, may have to drop down a little bit, but let's talk about the tweets you put out. So let's put the success one first, Oregon. So Dan Lanning inherits a program from Mario Cristobal, and they get guys that jump in a portal for whatever reason. Kingsley Suamatoa goes back home to Utah because he's homesick. That's not Lanning's fault. It's not Mario's fault. But a lot of talent from Oregon finding Power 5 homes, right?
All of them, which is not the norm. All, I believe, 8, 10, sorry. Well, one kid two withdrew. They got Sean Dollars to come back because they needed running back help because Trey Benson left and ended up at Florida State, and then Travis Dye left, surprisingly, and ended up at USC. So the thought was that Sean Dollars realized that there's no real reason to leave and withdrew his name. So they did a good job there either way. Besides that, yeah, they've sent players two to Auburn, UCLA, Miami, but 3 to Auburn, and 2 to Florida State. So yeah,
and some of those names, you know, Jason Jones, Robbie Ashford. I don't think Robbie Ashford's very good, so I'm not really worried about losing him for Oregon. I thought he was another guy who was overrated a bit, but Jason Jones, defensive lineman, Auburn. You know, there was this Auburn Oregon, remember, you know, sort of transfer exchange for a little while, Bo Nix and back and forth. DJ James, though, cornerback. Micah Pittman going to Florida State. Kingsley Suamatoa going to BYU. A lot of good programs. Trey Benson going to Florida State as well. Travis Dye, you mentioned. I'm worried a little bit about Oregon because the guys they're bringing in, you know, obviously Bo Nix and guys like that, you know, Chase Cota from UCLA is okay, but they're not bringing in the same amount of talent as they're losing. And I think Lanning is going to have a little bit of a challenge ahead of him.
Yeah, and obviously you never know what's going to happen there with the coaching change. The fans seem to love the new coaching staff. They're definitely, I guess, exciting is the word. The recruits seem to like him, but
geez, you got Tosh Lupoy, man. I mean, there's no more exciting assistant coach of recruiting than Tosh Lupoy.
Well, there you go.
You got Dillingham, who faced the battles in the Southeast with, you know, Auburn and Florida State, and I mean, they're bringing some dudes that can recruit. So it'll be interesting to see how they recruit and how they handle the portal next year too. And I have a feeling they're going to take some chances on some guys, and by chances I mean some guys that may have gotten in trouble or may, you know, have sort of attituded themselves out of schools. I don't think Lanning or those guys are afraid of kids with any sort of, you know, mediocre reputation. Texas, you put out the Texas information this morning. What was that?
Just caught my eye that, I mean, they've had a good amount, an average amount of players enter. Was it 14, 15, which is, I would say, about the national average. But there's a few surprising players which still, from what I know, have not found a home, like Chris Adamora, the DB, Alvante Woodard, the wide receiver, Adeoye, the linebacker, originally from Missouri. I'm not saying I expected them to go to Alabama or Georgia, but it's still surprising that all 3 of these have been in the portal for months and months. And the fact that they are, well, Tyler Johns is going to find a home because he's relatively new in there. But there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8 players who are still in the portal who haven't found a home, which is somewhat
telling. It's telling, you know.
Yeah, I guess telling.
and I remember after the end of the season, I thought Sark, I thought he would purge the roster. You know, there was talk of, you know, potentially 40 of the roster players being, you know, sort of pushed into the portal and really hitting the portal hard. And it hasn't been as active as that. You know, obviously that's pretty active. You know, 40s, I don't think it's ever happened, but, you know, it wouldn't have surprised me at that time if that was the case. But the fact that these guys aren't finding homes certainly speaks to, listen, they were highly rated recruits. So that's not on Herman or anybody. I mean, these were good football players, but it turns out they aren't good football players. But what Texas has coming in, Isaiah Nair, nobody knows really a lot about him now, except for kind of you and I. He's going to be really, really good. Billingsley, if he gets his head on straight at tight end, is certainly a top 10 tight end in college football next year. Ryan Watts, I absolutely love from Ohio State. He came because of an NIL deal. Obviously, Quinn Ewers, you know, went back for an NIL deal as well. Not a lot of addition, but the addition quality-wise is excellent, and they're not rated that high. You know, when you look at, you know, the rankings of but quality-wise, I think they're probably one of the most effective teams when it comes to quality. So they're purging and adding. And I think they're doing a really good job of it. 4 commitments in the portal. I think they're a top 10 program when it comes to the portal. Let's segue to Florida State. That was the big one, man. Spill it. You say it again. It was amazing.
Yeah, I mean, the fans were not, well, I wouldn't say they weren't happy. They just kind of, I guess it kind of just proved to them what they already knew, that the talent that was there the last few years wasn't working. And I guess this kind of verified that, because they've had 18 players enter the portal since August 1st, and only 2 have ended up at Power 5 programs, one of them being a kicker.
Yeah.
The other being Purdy,
yeah,
quarterback at Nebraska now, who at last check is at best second string there, possibly third, I haven't heard.
Yeah. Yep. Because you got Smothers and Casey Thompson there. So my theory on this, and I've written about it, and it's on the website, which is actually analytically doing okay. MikeFarrellSports.com, which I'm really surprised about.
All right.
Yeah, weird. I don't know why. It's free, so that helps. But listen, I'm still trying to figure out what I'm going to do with my life, but this is part of it. And the theory of Florida State to me was obviously Jimbo gave up in his last season. Didn't recruit. Everybody knew he had a foot out the door. He was having behind the scenes scandals and this, that, and the other, going through a divorce. And he had his foot out the door, and he knew he was going to a big program. Probably he already knew he was going to Texas A&M and just didn't care. And then they hired Taggart, who I thought would be a good fit, at least from recruiting, because he was at USF and had ties to Florida, and he just did a horrible job. But it's also player development, and it just hasn't been there. And then Mike Norvell comes in. 2020 is his first year, and guess what? We got a pandemic, and he can't go and see anybody. So he's sort of doing this guesswork 2020 recruiting. And they've started to, I don't know, turn the corner a little bit in recruiting in 2021, 2022. And 2021 is essentially the 2020 recruiting class, because that was the COVID year. So there is positivity, and they're getting some good players in the portal. I mean, Jared Verse is going to be awesome. That defensive end. I mean, he's going to replace Jermaine Johnson, and he has a chance to be very, very special. Johnny Wilson, if he cared about football, and the kid from Arizona State, could be great. He's a giant, and he's very athletic. The problem is always been, does he care about football? I think we had him as a 5-star, and then he dropped to a 4-star. Just didn't have that want to, but it's alarming. Now, this isn't put out here to blame anybody. This isn't put out here to say Florida State's a dumpster fire and that Mike Norvell's not doing a good job. It's put out here to say, hey, they've missed on these guys. I like how some people attack me and us. No, you were the guys that missed on the rankings. Like, no, we didn't take these kids. We didn't give them full scholarships at Florida State. That's not us. So mistakes were made. They've dug a hole. They haven't had a winning season in, 4 years, which is ridiculous for Florida State. And it's going to take a little while longer, I think, based on these numbers. That was shocking. And then, Tennessee's numbers didn't get any attention. Nobody paid attention to that, right? The fan base?
It picked up a little bit of steam, not like Florida State. Florida State was a raging fire quickly. But, yeah, I mean, it didn't get Florida State level attention, but it started to get a little buzz, because I think they're sort of happier, I guess, in Tennessee right now about the direction. They think they're closer to success than the Florida State fans, because they seem sort of just accepting of this situation and kind of ready to move on.
Yeah, and again, I mean, Norvell hasn't been given enough of a chance, but you could argue that Taggart wasn't given enough of a chance either. I mean, the guy was given a season and a half. So, but they can't afford. This is the problem. They're still paying Taggart. They can't afford to get rid of Norvell. So, and they're, what's brought up a lot is the NIL. They really don't have a NIL coalition at Florida State yet, and people think that that's a big issue. Now, Tennessee fans, as you said, they're happier. The offense was good last year. It was exciting. They still have a lot of holes in their roster, but they didn't really lose anybody I think losing out on Isaiah Nair is going to hurt for sure because he was committed to them at one point, and I think you're going to see him do really good things at Texas. But when it comes, what's that?
Them being able to actually get Tyler Barron back in as he withdrew his name was a big win for them too, I thought.
And people
Because
don't look
most
at
people
that.
thought he was going to end. Kentucky immediately popped up the second he entered the portal. Kentucky fans were really excited about that. And then like a day or two later, he withdrew his name. So I'm not sure what happened in that day or two, but I'm assuming the staff had something to do with that. And whatever they did was obviously productive.
Well, and that's a win that doesn't show up on the scoreboard. It's like, you're just not going to see them lose him or gain him, but they retained him. And all of the retention behind the scene we don't get to see is extremely important as well. I could tell you this for a fact. And, obviously Keishawn Butte is like the biggest example. And Elias Ricks was the biggest example last year. There are huge name guys that we're an enter button away. And that's not how it works. I know that's not how it works. They're not in front of the portal themselves, but can I have it? An enter button away from going into the portal, and the coaching staff saved it. And those saves are as important as gains. So that's a very good point there. So if I'm a Tennessee fan, I'm happy. I only got 5 commitments, from the portal. Maybe the biggest one is Gerald Mincy, who didn't really play at Florida, but he's a big body at least. Or Jackson Hanna from Nebraska, but nobody big. But you didn't lose a ton of guys that I think are very, very talented either. I do like the running back, Tyon Evans, but they're okay at running back, I think. So, and Harrison Bailey off to UNLV. That's just a lost opportunity and a real surprise to me and those of us who had him as a 5-star prospect. So I think that'll do it, right? That's a pretty good first one.
Yeah, I think so.
You win in the beard competition.
Thank you. Well, are you actually competing?
No, I can't. I could not grow that.
Are you just lazy?
This is lazy, but I can never grow that. That is like that's a heavy metal, Airtooth. What band does that remind you of?
One of the guys from Killswitch has a pretty gnarly beard right now.
All right.
So I'll go with that. I like the grayness down here as a winner.
Mark's taste in music is makes you want to think that he's not a serial killer, more of a mass murderer in waiting. I think I like music. Yeah. I like heavy music, but not to the point that his is just a little bit over the top for me. But I tried to convince him to go see Killswitch and engage in a snowstorm, freezing rainstorm.
2.5 hours away.
And I gave you 6 hours notice?
Yeah, it was great.
It was worth a shot, but so we're going to be doing these weekly. The portal is fascinating. Tell people how hard it is to cover
it. It's become a 24/7 thing nowadays. I mean, there's definitely down times, but it's definitely going to pick up in the next couple of weeks as spring practices are ending and kids realize that what they were hoping was going to happen in spring training did not happen, and they suddenly got passed by 2 incoming freshmen and are now 5th on the depth chart. So you'll definitely see some interesting names pop up in there in definitely next month. I'd say 2-3 weeks. And then November, December, January is just pure
hell.
Chaos. Yeah, hell, basically. Yes, hell.
I think they're going to change it eventually. I don't know how soon. They're going to put a calendar together where you can go in and you can't go in. Right now it's 365. It's 7-Eleven, man. It's 24/7, 365, right?
Yes. That
will change eventually, but the NCAA really isn't focused on that. They've got bigger fish to fry when it comes to this name, image, likeness stuff. But that will change. But you're taking a vacation and you're kind of sort of scheduling it pre-chaos, right?
Yeah, that wasn't really.
No. Lie to me and say it was planned.
I'll be fine. I'm gonna be looking for cell service while I'm hiking in the mountains of Washington State.
Well,
I'll try to tweet out some defensive back from North Texas who just entered.
just get some rest while you're hiking out there too, because when you get back, it's going to be absolutely nuts. So we'll go through maybe next week. We'll go through the teams that have done the best. I'm going to be doing an article soon on the top 10 transfers overall. I've already done it by position. I'm going to continue to do it by position. I think I'm doing the linebackers for tomorrow. So follow at Feral Portal, please. And I know there aren't a lot of people watching this, and I don't care. It's all about continuity and consistency. We're going to do this a lot, and follow M Feral Sports on Instagram. I got my check mark saved on Instagram and moved over to M Feral Sports, which is a slight miracle. And I got my check mark back in 2 days. That's a record. That's a Twitter record. When I changed my handle to M Feral Sports, 2 days. Well, no, I'm lying. 4 days. So that's a record too. So I am verified everywhere. TikTok won't verify me because I'm old and essentially creepy, I would imagine.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
look at me. I mean, you wouldn't verify me on TikTok, right?
No.
Close, right? Like, is there an opposite of verification, like a warning?
Yeah, disposal.
And then YouTube, Mike Feral Sports on YouTube. That's where this is going to be hosted. So that's it. Thanks for coming. Do you want to plug anything?
No, just it's a fun time or interesting time. So it's fun to talk to all the fans on Twitter. So if you have any questions or requests or whatever, just let me know over there.
Yeah, that's a good point. At Feral Portal, if you want to send out any requests, I've seen the spreadsheets that he's amassed. It's ridiculous. So if you want to know, like, oh, how many Abilene Christian kids have jumped in the portal for some reason, he's got it. So ask questions, follow it, tell your friends. I'm telling you, that old one is dead. This is the new one. And it's not growing as fast as I want it to. We're at 1,200 and something.
1260. I think.
Yeah, we got to 1,000 fast, but I got to push it out more and do a better job of marketing it. That's my job. I'm the marketing department. So we'll work on that, but follow it, put it on notifications, tell your friends about it, tell coaches about it, and we'll talk to you next week.
Take care.
All right, good. We're done. I'm going to download it. I'm going to have my guy, Matt, put it up on YouTube, and then I'll have somebody maybe cut up sections of it that we can use for Twitter.
Okay.
All right. Thanks. See you.
All right. I got to pick up somebody at a bus stop. So.
Oh, just random person?
That's what I do on Wednesday afternoons.
You pick up random people at bus stops?
Yes. No, my girlfriend's daughter.
All right, good. Phew. Not random.
Yeah.
All right. I'll talk to you. See ya.
All right. See you.